Imagine this. You wake up and something feels off. The streets are quiet. Too quiet. No cars, no chatter, no morning rush. You step outside and your breath catches. Everything you knew is gone. You don't see the city skyline. There are no roads. Instead, there's an endless ocean stretching as far as you can see. You smell the salty air and hear seagulls crying above, but it's not comforting. It's terrifying. The world you grew up in, the one you thought was permanent, is now underwater. But what could cause such a global catastrophe? The answer lies at the bottom of the world, Antarctica. A land so vast it holds 70% of the planet's fresh water locked away in ancient ice sheets. Ice so thick that, in some places, it towers over 2 miles high. Now imagine that ice, which took millions of years to form, melting at a terrifying speed. Scientists have been sounding the alarm. If Antarctica's ice were to melt entirely, it would release enough water to raise global sea levels by 200 feet. Think about it. An entire continent's worth of ice turned to liquid, reshaping the planet's geography forever. Now, you might be wondering, why would Antarctica's ice melt so rapidly? Imagine, you're holding a block of ice in your hand. It's cold, solid, and seemingly unmovable. But now, imagine placing that same block under a heat lamp. Slowly, drop by drop, it melts away. Not because the ice wanted to, but because of the heat it couldn't escape. Now picture that block of ice as Antarctica. The heat lamp? It's us. Scientists have been shouting from the rooftops about the culprit, global warming. Over the last century, the Earth's average temperature has risen by 1.1 degrees Celsius. Doesn't sound like much? Think again. For every degree increase, the Antarctic ice sheet loses an estimated 150 billion tons of ice annually. That's enough to fill 60 million Olympic-sized swimming pools every single year. But why is this happening? It all ties back to the greenhouse effect. Imagine Earth wrapped in a blanket made of gases like carbon dioxide and methane. These gases trap heat from the sun, warming the planet. A cozy blanket on a cold night sounds nice, right? But this blanket keeps getting thicker, thanks to us burning fossil fuels like coal, oil, and natural gas. The result? Earth's natural air conditioning, Antarctica, is starting to fail. Now let's make this personal. Picture this. You're sipping coffee in the morning, your car running outside to warm up. Harmless, right? But that car releases 4.6 metric tons of CO2 every year. Multiply that by the billion cars worldwide, and you start to see the scale of the problem. Or take a look at your kitchen. The electricity powering your fridge? If it's from coal, you're indirectly melting glaciers thousands of miles away. In fact, every kilowatt hour of coal-powered energy produces 2 pounds of CO2. Every light you forget to turn off, every hour of streaming your favorite show, it all adds up. Now, imagine this. The ocean waters around Antarctica are warming too. Warmer water eats away at the ice shelves from below, like termites gnawing on a wooden beam. This is known as basal melting, and it's responsible for nearly 50% of ice loss in some areas. Now that we understand how human actions are accelerating the melting, let's pause for a moment and think, how close are we to the point of no return? Is the clock ticking faster than we realize? The truth is, it might be even worse than we thought. For decades, scientists have warned us. They've told us that the ice sheets of Antarctica are melting at an unprecedented rate. But how close are we to disaster? Could it happen tomorrow? Or are we safe for centuries ahead? Here's where the truth gets uncomfortable. In the last 50 years, Antarctica has lost over 3 trillion tons of ice. 3 trillion. That's not a typo. It's enough ice to flood the entire United States, not just with a little water, but with oceans that could drown entire cities. So, what if all of this ice suddenly melted? Could it happen overnight? The truth is, the process is already in motion, and we may be closer to the tipping point than we think. Imagine being part of a generation that witnessed the tipping point firsthand. What if, in the next decade, rising temperatures caused the Antarctic ice shelves to collapse in one catastrophic event? Scientists now believe this is no longer a distant possibility. It's becoming a terrifying reality. Take a look at what's happening right now in the Doomsday Glacier in West Antarctica. This massive glacier, often referred to as the Doomsday Glacier, is holding back enough ice to raise sea levels by 10 feet. It's melting faster than ever before, and it's starting to destabilize at an alarming rate. One study published by the National Academy of Sciences estimates that Doomsday Glacier could lead to sea level rises of 11 feet in the next 50 to 100 years, and that's just one glacier. Now, what if this accelerated melting didn't take decades, but just a few short years? What if we hit the tipping point tomorrow? Researchers are increasingly concerned that the point of no return is nearer than anyone predicted. Once the ice reaches a certain temperature, it starts to melt exponentially. It's like a runaway train. There's no way to stop it. Every year, the West Antarctic ice sheet is losing around 159 billion tons of ice. And that's just one part of the continent. If we continue on this path, we're looking at more than 200 feet of sea level rise over the coming centuries. But here's the thing. The timeline could be shorter than we realize. In 2019, NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory released a study showing that if global temperatures rise by just 2 degrees Celsius, some of the ice could melt faster than anticipated. And with current trends, we're on track to hit that mark in the next few decades. It's not some distant, futuristic science fiction nightmare. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. As the ice melts at an alarming rate, we can't help but wonder, what will the world look like if it all happens in our lifetime? What will cities like New York, Venice, and Miami become? The answers might just shock you. The sea level rise caused by Antarctica's ice melting wouldn't be gradual. It would be catastrophic. Scientists warn that if all of Antarctica's ice were to melt, the global sea level would rise by 200 feet, enough to submerge entire cities, countries, and ecosystems. That's nearly 60 meters of water engulfing the planet. In places like Bangladesh, where millions live just a few meters above sea level, the results would be nothing short of devastating. Imagine the entire Ganges Delta, one of the most densely populated regions in the world, flooded. More than 150 million people could be displaced, and the agricultural heartland would be lost. The fertile lands, now sustaining billions, would turn into saltwater marshes, rendering them uninhabitable. The Maldives, a tropical paradise of white sand beaches and crystal clear waters, would no longer exist. 1,200 islands of the Maldives are spread across the Indian Ocean, and nearly 80% of these islands are only a meter or two above sea level. A flood of this magnitude would drown these islands, erasing a culture, a nation, and a way of life. Imagine the once pristine beaches of the Maldives, now a part of history books and pictures on the internet. Those beautiful resorts? Gone. And the tourism economy? Destroyed. But the story doesn't end there. Refugee crises would skyrocket as millions of people are forced to leave their homes and their countries. The world would see one of the largest migrations in human history, as families flee the flooding destruction, seeking shelter in other nations that are themselves on the brink of disaster. From the sinking cities of New York to the drowning islands of Pacific nations, the refugee crisis would spread like wildfire. What happens when the entire nation of Bangladesh has nowhere to go? When small island nations like Tuvalu and Kiribati no longer exist? It would spark an international humanitarian emergency, with governments scrambling to find solutions. Resources would become scarce, and countries would face growing tensions as millions of displaced people fight for survival in already overburdened areas. Now let's have an eye on solutions. The road ahead is daunting, but it's not too late to turn things around. So, what's our next move? Can we still rewrite the future? Let's explore the solutions that could save us and our planet from this irreversible crisis. The choice is ours, but time is running out. It starts with something simple yet powerful: our carbon footprints. Every time we drive a car, use energy, or consume resources, we add to the problem. But if we all made a collective effort to reduce emissions, we could cut 4.8 billion tons of CO2, equivalent to erasing the emissions of the entire United States for a year. Renewable energy like solar, wind, and hydropower are within our reach. The question is, will we act on it? Then there's geoengineering. It sounds like science fiction, but it's a rapidly growing field. From carbon capture technologies that suck CO2 from the air to solar radiation management, which could reflect sunlight and cool the planet, these solutions could buy us the critical time we need to reverse the damage. It's not perfect, but it's a lifeline. The clock is ticking, though. Antarctica's ice is melting at an accelerating pace, and scientists say we have less than 10 years to take action. The world has come together to solve these type of crisis before. Remember how we healed the ozone layer? We have the tools, we just need the will. The truth is, we have everything we need to prevent disaster, but we have to act fast. Will we rise to the challenge? Will we push for change, not just for ourselves, but for future generations? That's all for today. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to show some love by hitting that like and subscribe button for more content like this.